In the past week, the internet has been boiling with conversations about the decision by the writers and showrunner of Bridgerton to gender bend Michaela Stirling, who is now Michaela Stirling, cousin to John Stirling, and the conversation has ranged from what on earth were they thinking to this changes the whole story and can never work to my personal favorite, Bridgerton has gone woke and political and Jess Brownwell, who is Bridgerton's showrunner by the way, has ruined the show. And in the last couple of days, I've been thinking about it. Does Michaela Stirling work, or is this once again a case of an adaptation that is cursed to ruin its source material with the first change to score some diversity points as far as the show is concerned? Well, over the next 25 to 30 minutes, I will be exploring that, drawing across large swaths of the source material for us to agree or disagree. Personally, I hope you agree with me on whether or not Michaela Stirling works. I wonder if you can guess where I fall on this divide. The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last. Before I fully dive into this video, I would first like to apologize to those who prior to the internet exploding with calls of where is Michael? I didn't sign up for this. Bridgerton has gone woke and now we're getting Michaela and Francesca instead of Michael and Francesca, who had thought that John and Francesca were endgame. I'm sure a lot of you were confused as hell because last time you checked, Francesca was married to John. Who the fuck is Michael Stirling? The internet unfortunately has forgotten fandom etiquette of assuming and trying to preserve other people's enjoyment of stories by not spoiling major plot points before the rest of us can catch up. I'm sorry that your fandom experience was not curated in a way for you to be as surprised as the rest of us who were hit with the development in the first chapter of When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn, which is aptly dubbed Francesca's story. The first time we read it, spoiler alert for those who have been able to successfully avoid spoilers so far and have no idea what the ruckus is about, if you have been able to dodge and avoid all the conversations, then good for you. I will say retain that innocence, and the minute you hear me say, I started my reread of When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn, step away from this video so you can be just as pleasantly or heartbreakingly surprised as we all were when we first got hit with the shock of the happenings in the second chapter of the story. Do remember to like this video first though before you go. As a nod of thanks to me remembering that fandom is driven by the expectation that we keep spoilers at a minimum, or at the very least give a heads up warning of spoilers ahead. If however you still choose to watch the entire video even if you haven't read the book yet, I will try my best to keep the spoilers to the barest bones of what happened in the first 4 chapters. The book is 24 chapters long and things really pick up in the second part of the story, which starts on chapter 5 anyway. So you can at least rest easy in that knowledge that should you choose to read the book, or should the adaptation Gods Bless Us and Bridgerton is renewed up to season 6, you can still enjoy the story for the most part. Now, back in 2017, I fell into the trap, the wormhole that is Shadowhunters, the TV show, with its cheesy dialogue, the horrible CGI effects, the seraph blades that look like they were created by kindergartners for a show and tell of a failed Star Wars experiment, and with the gloriousness of Arisham Jr. and Matthew Daddario as Magnus Bane and Alec Lightwood, respectively. The show borrowed itself into my brain. It consumed my every waking moment. I made Tumblr gifts and wrote and read fan fiction. I functioned on 2 hours of sleep on the days it aired. I was part of every social media takeover. I was in the fandom in a way I hadn't been since when I first got into Naruto a decade before that. What can I say? This girl is a fandom veteran. An elder, some might call me. Oh, the days of chat rooms and internet forums. But back to Shadowhunters, I love the show. I adored all the characters. Clarife with her annoyingness, Jace Whalen with his cockiness, played by Dominic Sherwood, who definitely should have taken kissing lessons because there's nothing sexy when you're about to eat the entirety of your castmate's face in the name of a kiss. I adored Simon and Isabel. Maya was my girl. I wanted Luke to adopt me. Alec was the big brother I wanted, and Magnus Bane helped me figure out my sexuality, gave me the courage to come out, and had me cheering for Malek. I love that show. Still love it with all its messiness. And so I could never understand why those who read the books and loved the books hated the show, like really hated the show. When I say I was deep in this fandom, I mean deep enough that I joined show fans in shading Cassandra Clare, author of The Mortal Instrument, which is the series of books that the show was adapted from. Anytime she made a subtle comment, like how, of course, she would go all the way and show the stakes of the war by having Max die, unlike the choice made by the show, I joined the rest of the fandom, rising like Mushu from the ashes to shout, "Dishonor on your cow!" I was jobless, and my ass had a full-time job and was working in 80 to 90-hour weeks at this point. So imagine my surprise when I finally got around to reading the Mortal Instrument series. I still found them trite, but they were addictive. And they grew on me. And next thing I knew, I was reading the Infernal Devices, the Dark Artifices. You can't see it properly, but I now have on my shelf every single book ever written by Cassandra Clare. I even participated in a Kickstarter, so I'm going to have even more books of hers that others might not even get the chance to own. I am obsessed. And with that obsession came a realization as to why fans of the book so hated the show. Now, I came to the show first and I enjoyed the portrayal of the actors, even the way Kat McNamara annoyed the shit out of me as Clary Frey, because I find Clary annoying. But like I said, I came to the show first. And now I've read the books, I can appreciate both stories as the different forms of the world and the story that they exist as. There's the Shadowhunters Chronicles, the book series, there's Shadowhunters, the show, and then there's Shadowhunters, the movie, which we never talk about because that didn't stand a chance. Rest in peace though, Godfrey Gao. Anyway, the entire scenario taught me one thing about fandom and adaptations. We all like what we like. There are things about the stories that we gravitate towards, that we enjoy. For me, with the entire Shadowhunters Chronicles, it's the lore, the world building, the little callbacks that Cassandra Clare does throughout the entire series, spanning multiple books. It's Magnus Bane, it's Alec Lightwood, it's Malek. And if anybody, in attempting to mess with the adaptation, touched my ship, I would have drop-kicked them down into the pits of hell to say hello to Asmodeus, not King Asmodeus of the Infernal Divine, but Asmodeus' father to Magnus Bane, who rules over Edom. Ships are a core part of enjoying fiction, especially if those ships mean something to you. Maybe something about the story resonates in a particular way, and it only does so because of that particular ship. And when that ship is touched or messed with in some way, we tend to react in a visceral, emotional way. Because I repeat, ships are important. They have the power to make us lose all sense of reason and be just as irrevocably linked to the source material as can be. Malek is it for me. Changing them in any way will make me lose my shit, even in present day. But I've also read fan fiction where they are gender bent, and I've also appreciated those fics because ultimately the thing about gender bending, especially within the world of fan fiction, is that it gives room for us to explore parts of the story and parts of the themes that we otherwise would not have gotten if the characters are stayed as is. In this case, Malek being a lesbian couple have different themes, and the way they navigate their world is vastly different from Malek when they are male. Now, you might be wondering why I'm bringing up fan fiction in a video you clicked on about Michaela Stirling and the curse of adaptations. Well, it's because that's at the core what adaptations are. They are fan fiction. Fan fiction written by writers who are given the source materials and these characters and who are given the leeway to play around with them, make tweaks to suit the story that they want to tell, and bring more depth or a different perspective to these characters and this world that they are adapting. They are given carte blanche to a large extent to play around with the characters and their world for the sake of a compelling story. Adaptations at their core are fan fiction, except they are fan fiction that the writers get paid for and who reach a much wider audience than those who just read fanfic on AO3. Now, before you come and type things in my comments like, but that makes no sense, why can't we just get a direct adaptation of the books, like word for word, bar for bar? Why should they make such horrible changes? All I can say is, I feel you. I have been you. Everybody talks about the Untamed, and I'm just over here holding my copy of Modal Zushi and crying because the writers absolutely massacred the story and what it stood for. But hey, at least we got Zhao Zhan and Wang Yibo. But ultimately, adaptations exist the way they do because, as George R.R. Martin so aptly put it, some writers think they can do better than the source material and go on to do so. It happens. If the writer of the source material doesn't want that to happen, the best bet is often to simply not agree. Don't accept any adaptation. Otherwise, accept them the way Stephen King does, aware that some would be good, some would be utter shite, and some would be mid. It is the curse of adaptation. Do you think fans of Lev Grossman's The Magicians didn't cry bloody murder at the changes that they got in their story? Of course they did. But it is what it is. Also, I am team The Magician Show was 100% better than the books, which I couldn't read past the first one because I hated it and hated Book Quentin. I'll still read the rest of the series, but not anytime soon. But back to what I was saying, the writers of the adaptation get to tweak what they want to tell a more compelling story. And sometimes they do honestly believe that they can bring more to the world. Which brings us back around to Bridgerton. When Julia Quinn was asked in an interview years ago why on earth she doesn't write black people into her romance novels, she responded by telling us that, I write Regency romance, and in Regency period, black people simply did not exist in Regency Britain. They were slaves, and this is a Regency romance, not a slave book. So I just cannot fathom possibly writing about black people because Regency. Just in case you couldn't tell by my expression and sarcasm, and would you look at that? The nose, the lips, the skin, the melanin. My black ass is offended. Still is, because I call bullshit. Regency romance is escapist fiction, and Elizabeth Dido Bell was a real-life mixed-race aristocrat. But most importantly, I find it interesting that she went from "I can't see black people in the world are created" to agreeing to have a story adapted by a black woman and having the covers of her book redesigned to feature the characters from the TV show, one of whom is black. Because Bridgerton did bring a tons of fans into her stories, some of them black. Did I read and was I okay with the books the way they were? Yes. Did I enjoy them? To some extent, yes. They aren't the epitome of literature, but some of the books were a blast to read, namely Hyacinth's, Francesca's, and Anthony's. But back to my initial point that adaptations are basically an elevated form of fan fiction for television. The showrunners and writers made the decision that in the world of Bridgerton, racism does not exist, which is an interesting point, but this is also the show that had a string quartet for Gale's ABCDFU. I mean, historical accuracy isn't the strongest point for Bridgerton. The show likes to pick and drop them to what suits its purpose best, like fan fiction. So when they decided to gender bend Michael into Michaela, I rolled with it. Same way I rolled with the convenient fact that an orchestra in 1810s London was able to give us a string version of Kabikushi Kabigam Najudageram Kabikushi Kabigam. With adaptations, rolling with it is the best way to enjoy the story. But then I saw the outrage, the talks about how the story doesn't work anymore, and I was like, really? Does it really not work anymore? Are you all really 100% sure about that? So I picked up my Kindle, dusted it because I've been on a physical book reading binge of late and the poor dear has been neglected. And I started my reread of When It Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. Reminder, those of you who want absolutely no spoilers about even the slightest bit of the story, here is where you drop off. Thank you for staying with me so far. Don't forget to hit the like button before you go. Now that the no spoiler peeps are gone, let's get back to how Michaela Stirling could possibly work. Because in case you haven't figured it out yet, I am team let the writers cook. Now, in When It Was Wicked, and like I promised, I'm going to try and keep the spoilers minimal. In When It Was Wicked, Michael and Francesca were friends, very good friends. In fact, Fran admits that Michael was John's best friend. His father and John's were twins. Michael was born a year earlier than John, but because John's father was the elder twin, John was the heir and so became the Earl of Kilmartin. Now, for those who have no idea where on the peerage an Earl stands, that's just below the rank of Duke and Marquis, but above Viscount and Baron. Yes, John Stirling is of a higher position than Anthony Bridgerton, and both families are old English families, although the Stirlings are more aligned with their Scottish ancestry. Anyway, John is the Earl. Michael is his cousin and best friend. Fran also considers Michael her best friend as well. The three of them get along jolly well, except Michael has been in love with Fran since he first met her in the books, The Evening Party, before her marriage to John, unlike in the show when Michaela meets her after the wedding. But yeah, Michael has loved Fran since he first met her. But John met her first, and so Michael sits in that unrequited love, burning with yearning, but also aware that there's a line he's not allowed to cross. Until John dies of a brain aneurysm. Like this happens in the first 2 chapters. John lies down to sleep in chapter 1 and doesn't wake up in chapter 2. So really early book stuff, no big spoilers here. Anyway, with John dead, Michael is now Earl Kilmartin and filled with the grief and devastation of his loss, of wondering if somewhere in the back of his mind, filled with that desire for his cousin's wife, he might have subconsciously wished for the death of his best friend. He runs away to India for 4 years. And when he returns 4 years later, it's to meet Francesca, who has decided that this is the season she remarries because she wants kids. That's the basic premise of the first 4 chapters of the book, and it's enough for me to talk about why I think Michaela Stirling works. And we'll start with the obvious. Michael Stirling is a rake who has a close relationship and companionship with Francesca Bridgerton Stirling. She gets him, he gets her, and she loves him telling her all the scandalous things he does to women in the town. She particularly loves it when he tells her something wicked. That role in that story, in their romance, can just as easily be fulfilled by Michaela. In fact, one would say it's going to be even more scandalous because just as with Michael, she's going to be having a ton of sex, bringing pleasure and heartbreak and charm and riz to the women of the town, to the daughters and the mothers and the widows. She's going to have them in her trawl. Their eyes will follow her everywhere she goes. Their hearts will skip a beat or two. They will reach for her heart in throat, getting off the fact that nobody else could know, could possibly suspect that she had spent the previous night with her head in between their thighs. Did I scandalize you? Good. Because that's the essence of Michael's story. He's like no other love interest we get in the series, and so would Michaela. One would even say that her friendship with Francesca can be even deeper, much deeper than the book even portrays. And it would work. She can just as easily fill in the role of friend and confidant that Michael did in the books. That is not going to change. So, we've gotten the rake Michael can be rake Michaela out of the way. We've gotten the dirty talking, sexy times Michael can be dirty talking, sexy time Michaela out of the way as well. And we know that friend and confident Michael can just as well be friend and confident Michaela. Now that those are done, let's move on to the other element of the story. Michael's inheritance of the earldom. Cracroft's Peerage, which offers us a complete guide to the British peerage and baronetage, offers us a look into female succession in Scotland. Abeyance, as I have said, is peculiar to England. It has never existed in Scotland, and in that kingdom, in default of male heirs, a peerage not limited in descent to the male line passes at once to the elder or eldest daughter or nearest female heir. They go on further to give an example in the write-up. An interesting case because of its possibilities is that of the earldom of Sutherland, the oldest of the Duke of Sutherland's peerages and one of the oldest on the Scottish roll. Paternally, the Duke is English, descended from the ancient Yorkshire family of Gower. The family name now is Sutherland Levison Gower. His great-great-grandfather, the second Marquis of Stafford, married Elizabeth, Countess of Sutherland in her own right and was later created Duke of Sutherland. The present 5th Duke has no children and his only brother died, leaving an only daughter who is thus heiress presumptive to the Scottish earldom and the barony of Strathnaver. I will drop the link to the entire write-up in the description bar. It is a fascinating read. But as I'm sure you've already figured out, Michaela can inherit the earldom after John passes, just like Michael does in the book. Again, no difference. Because Kilmartin, being a Scottish title that was created before 1707, like I stated earlier in the video, they are one of the old families, can be passed on and inherited by a woman if there are no sons that rank before her. Michaela can become and most likely will become Earl Kilmartin. So at least in that regards, Michaela can play Michael's role successfully in the story. Fine, Noria, you concede, but they need to be married in some way. This is Bridgerton, a romance, and unfortunately, Michaela can't marry Francesca because she's not Michael. To that, I would read Answer's speech on the discussion on bill registration of births and marriages in Scotland in August 1848. The law of Scotland as to marriage was this: it adopted the principle that consent alone made marriage. The law of Scotland did not require the presence of a priest nor the intervention of any religious ceremony. The law of Scotland considered marriage to be a civil contract, but it did not provide any particular mode by which that contract was to be proved. Scotland thrived on irregular marriages and worked with it. And tell me, what is more irregular than a marriage between a woman and her late husband's cousin who is also a woman? Like, I know I'm stretching the law a bit, but there is some precedent with which the writers could work historically if that's what they decide to go with in the story. Like Scottish historian T.C. Smout states, irregular marriages remained valid until 1939 because the Scots held to the simple doctrine that any two unmarried people of lawful age until 1929, 12 for a girl, 14 for a boy, that wished to get married, if they were physically capable and not within the prohibited degrees of kinship, and they both fully expressed this wish and freely accepted each other in marriage, then they were married. I will drop the link to the irregular marriage and the Kirk session in Scotland post in the description bar if you're interested in more reading. But Noria, you say, what about Francesca? Nothing about the book or the story states that she's in any way queer. And to that I say, yes, you are right. Nothing about the book directly states that Francesca is queer, but nothing about the book states that Simon Basset was black. In fact, he is very white in the books, with sandy blonde hair and ice blue eyes, but making Simon a black man in season 1 adds further credence to why his father was so driven to punish any sort of perceived flaw out of his son. Because by virtue of their race, the former Duke of Hastings is aware that their lineage would be judged extra harshly as is done in present-day society. Shonda Rhimes, Chris Van Dusen, and the writers of the first season found a way to further justify why the Duke would have been so much harsher than he would need to be and tied it to Simon's race. And it worked. Of course, I've not forgotten that a large part of the fandom were pissed that they got a black man as Simon, but then Bridget John Page showed up and the thirst won, I guess. The same can be explored with Francesca. In When It Was Wicked, Fran, when she was thinking about her family and her position amongst her siblings and her mother, admits to herself that yes, she might be a Bridgerton and look like one. On the inside, however, she's always felt a bit like a changeling. Those were her words, that she's always navigated a time within her family like she's different, like something's different about her that she's never really been able to place. I'm not yanking this out of my ass, it's in the literal text. The writers could easily have decided to explore that. Why does Francesca feel like a changeling? Why does she feel like there's something different about her that sets her apart from her siblings? Could it possibly be because maybe, just maybe, she feels like a lot of queer teenagers and people who have always felt a bit different from those in their lives? Maybe that she's always wondered, just wondered really, and never figured out what it is until much later in the story when she does get together with Michaela. Is that when it finally clicks for her in a, oh, so that's what that was the way it's clicked for a lot of queer folks, myself included? I'm pretty sure some of you might think it's a reach, but remember, if you consider adaptations as a form of fan fiction and you're a fanfic writer being given the bare bones of a story to do with it what you would, a singular line in the text might just send your mind scurrying across different possibilities. It's how writing works. Of course, her story, Fran's story, needs the writers to craft it well, adeptly, in a way that speaks authentically and true. And unfortunately, I don't know if I trust them enough to do so, but we'll see. Now, for those of you who are upset with the way in which Francesca looks in that scene when John introduces her to Michaela, I am with you on that 100%. I think the way that scene was shot was ass. The director could totally have done better. Because part of what makes Francesca and Michael work for me was that added tension and layer where Michael fell for her first. Completely, irrevocably. Michael falling first was a core part of their love story and was central to how their story plays out in the books. I'm not going to go into actual details because of spoilers, but it was essential. And that's why I think that the scene wasn't directed properly. I think it was more of Francesca was stunned. Here is this beautiful, clearly charming woman talking to her. Her brain did that thing it does when you meet a woman that just takes your breath away with how stunning she is. Like you wonder, wow, is she even real? Like really, she looks, wow. I believe that Francesca's brain was going pretty in a, oh my god, she's so pretty, look at her skin and her hair and she's glowing, and not, I want to see how she tastes pretty, because those are two different pretties. One is a latent attraction that doesn't hit you until years after when it suddenly strikes you. Like it does Francesca at the park, where she suddenly notices and realizes that all these years she has noticed Michael's full lips, but only clocked it properly in the park that those full lips are utterly kissable. And the other pretty is an instant attraction. I think it's the first and not the second, and the director was just shit at shooting that, considering that we can't get a POV into Francesca's head via television. It's sad really, and I also think it's why a lot of people interpreted her kiss scene with John so differently. Like I've watched that scene a dozen times. I love that Fran gets to have two great loves in her book, and the show up until that point had been doing so well in showing us the beats of how her love with John is. Companionable, soft, serene, calm. Francesca Bridgerton admits in the book that it is possible that part of her attraction to John is because he removed her from the noise of her family. She loves him because he understood her, he anticipated her, he completed her. It's lovely. And that's what we got for most of the season. And so when we got to that shot of her wedding after her vows and she's meant to kiss him, I don't think she was expecting fireworks and blinding passion. That was never how her relationship with John was. But the characters we had seen and gotten used to so far had that, and they had all kissed way before their wedding. This was Francesca's first kiss. She was kissing this man who is now her husband before her family, before God. So she took a moment to calm the nerves, leans in, and yeah, we don't get fireworks, but look at the way she looks up at him afterwards. Bright and happy and serene. That has always been the color of her love for John, the shape and color and contours of the emotion she feels for him. So I was absolutely delighted with the scene. Imagine my surprise when I got online and realized that not everybody read that scene that way. Oh well, it happens. But back to Francella. What do you all think of my suggested shit name? Because I like it. But as I was saying, back to Francella and why they work. I'm a big fan of being honest to myself, and I think that a lot of us should be too. Because personally for me and for a lot of readers of When It Was Wicked, the reason why we loved Michael and Fran was that it was scandalous. There was the build-up of the desire, the illicit nature of it. The pool was ramped up, and just like Francesca, we hit that crescendo when the drawing room scene happens. We will still get that with Michaela. Even more so, it would be illicit, it would be scandalous, doubly so, because she's both a woman and John's cousin, and Fran is John's widow. The clutching of pearls and finding ourselves and just being utterly soaked in the sex and sensuality and the desires that thrums between Michael and Francesca would be heightened even more so with Michaela. She would spend days learning how Fran tastes and how she shudders and where she likes to be touched and how she tenses and releases. It would be hot, like really hot, like we would have to come up for hair if their scenes together are shot well, and Francella could possibly be the hottest couple Bridgerton would give us. Romance and sex, baby, romance and sex. But Noria, what about the elephant in the room? Yes, I know you all have been thinking about it. A core part of the conflict for Fran in When He Was Wicked is tied to her desire to have children. But before I dive into how it could possibly be solved, I would like to point out that the entire story with Fran's infertility issues happens in the second epilogue of When He Was Wicked. Like, we know that she wanted kids and was trying to have them, but her issues with infertility and the toll it takes on her happens in the second epilogue. And the reason I keep emphasizing second epilogue is because Julia Quinn writes it way later, after the story was completed. In fact, if you got the first editions of the Bridgerton books, they didn't have the second epilogue, just the first. The first was the initial completion of the story. In Julia Quinn's note at the end of the book, she mentions that she wanted to show readers what happens beyond the curtains with the Bridgertons after the books are done, and initially wrote the epilogues to be compiled into a separate book. It wasn't until recent years that she had them added to the original story, so they weren't there before. It's why, for example, I never reread the second epilogue of On His Way to the Wedding, which is Gregory's book. Like, I already read it once and I found it too traumatizing. But back to Fran's fertility issues, it doesn't really come to bear in her relationship with Michael in the books. Now, before you react instinctively, really think about it. It had no bearing on her relationship with Michael. It was instead tied to her wants and needs as a character, as an individual, which is why it is ramped up in the second epilogue of the story that you can choose to read or not read. And I'm pretty sure there are some mothers who have zero idea that the second epilogue even exists. Michael and Fran's story to them ended after John's mother writes to the two. So if we can agree that the fertility issues are separate from the romance of Michael and Fran, then it can be separate from the romance of Michaela and Fran. But I am aware that Julia Quinn wrote that because there are women who deal with fertility issues and she wanted to represent that, and we don't need to lose that for Fran's story. Because remember, it is tied more to her story rather than a story with Michael. So therefore, we can have Fran still have her fertility issues, but instead have them with John. They were married for 2 years after all before John dies. That's more than enough time to show Fran struggling to conceive and the toll it takes on her and on everyone around her, Michaela inclusive, who want to see her get that joy and have that baby. And when she finally does conceive, follow that up with what happens in the books. John dies. But unlike in the books, she doesn't lose the baby. Once again, the miscarriage is in the 3rd chapter of the book, so minimal spoilers, don't worry y'all, I got you. But yes, she doesn't lose the baby. That way we're able to establish the infertility issues while still having Francesca have her baby. And if you're wondering about how Michaela gets to become an earl if Francesca has a baby, the answer is pretty simple. Francesca will have a girl, maybe twin girls even. And Michaela, as the eldest female relative, still gets to inherit the earldom. Problem solved. But Noria, you say, problem not solved. Because then, where is the bit of conflict with Michaela? The answer is right there. Michaela loves her, wants to be with her. And Francesca, like in the books, is scandalized because not only is she John's cousin, but she's also a woman and a rake. And we still get the sex is earth-shattering, thighs quivering good, but I don't want to marry you drama that we get in the books. Problem solved. I think rather than sit with the fury of an adaptation that is being changed and Michael not showing up in the show, we should instead make as the Dowager Countess of Kilmartin does. On behalf of Bridgerton book fans, thank you, Michaela, for letting Michael love her first. If you stay to the end of this long video, bloody hell, I'd like to say a huge thank you, and please like this video. It took me so bloody long to put it together. Share it with others, especially those who are either happy at the change or furious about it. I would like to see if I could change some perspectives. Of course, if you want to discuss the video in the comments, I'm okay with that. Just remember, leave a ton of asterisks at the top of your comments so people have to really scroll down to get to it. That way we reduce people being spoiled on the story itself. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel, consider doing so and check out my other videos whilst you're at it, especially my last Bridgerton one where I talk about the disrespect of season 3B. My next Bridgerton video is going to be on Benedict Bridgerton, so do keep an eye out for that. I make new videos 3 times a week. Mondays are for anime manga content, Wednesdays are for movies and TV shows, Fridays are my Noria can post anything she wants days, so that can be something bookish, additional movie or TV show content, something on video games. The sky is the limit. But yeah, on to my next video. Do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.